Do you know what 30 years spent in Yosemite teaches you? That nature has its laws, that animals follow predictable patterns of behavior, that trees grow toward the light, and that water flows downhill. Roads don't just appear overnight. They are carved out over decades, even centuries, by thousands of footprints. That's why what happened in October 2019 shook everything I thought I knew about this place to its core. Before continuing, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. If you liked this story, please hit the like button on the video to help our channel grow. They call me Ranger David Sullivan. I've been working for the National Park Service since 1989. For over 30 years, I've been involved in search and rescue, wildlife management, and preventing foolish tourists from doing reckless things for Instagram photos. I know all the official trails in Yosemite. In fact, I know almost all the unofficial ones too, so I can tell you for certain that the trail I found on October 15th, 2019, was definitely not there the day before. October in Yosemite is my favorite time of year. The summer crowds have thinned out. The air has that perfect, crisp quality that makes you want to hike forever, and the changing leaves paint the valley in colors that no photograph can truly capture. I was doing a routine patrol in the backcountry, about 7 miles northeast of Tuolumne Meadows, in an area that sees maybe a dozen hikers a week during peak season. In October, you're lucky to see another human being out there at all. I'd been checking on some reported bear activity near Glen Aulin when I noticed something that made me stop dead in my tracks. There, cutting through a grove of lodgepole pines I'd walked through literally hundreds of times, was a trail. Not a game trail. Those are narrow, meandering, following the path of least resistance. This was a proper trail, about 3 feet wide, worn smooth, with the kind of definition that comes from heavy, consistent use. The thing is, I'd been through this exact spot just 2 weeks earlier doing a wildlife survey. There had been no trail. I pulled out my GPS, thinking maybe I'd gotten turned around somehow. But no, I was exactly where I thought I was. Grid reference 37.9 degrees north, 119.4 degrees west. I'd stood in this exact spot 14 days ago, and there had been nothing but untouched forest floor covered in pine needles and the occasional fallen branch. I radioed back to headquarters, more out of habit than anything else. "Dispatch, this is Sullivan. I've got something weird out here near Glen Aulin." "Define weird, Dave," came the response. It was Jennifer Martinez, who'd been working dispatch for almost as long as I'd been a ranger. "I'm looking at a trail that shouldn't exist. Well-worn, clearly established, but it's not on any of our maps." There was a pause. "Probably just a social trail. You know how people are, always trying to find shortcuts. Social trails are unofficial paths created by hikers going off-trail repeatedly. We deal with them all the time, usually by blocking them off and revegetating the area. But this wasn't that. Social trails are messy, irregular, obviously man-made. This trail looked organic, natural, like it had always been there. More importantly, social trails lead somewhere, to a viewpoint, a water source, something that would attract hikers. This trail led deeper into the wilderness, away from any landmarks or destinations that would interest tourists. "I'm going to follow it for a bit," I told Jennifer. "See where it goes." "Copy that. Check in every 30 minutes. I started down the trail, and immediately something felt off. The temperature dropped noticeably, maybe 10 degrees, which wasn't unusual in the shade of the forest, but this was different. The cold felt deliberate, concentrated, like walking into a walk-in freezer. My breath came out in visible puffs, which shouldn't have been happening at 2 in the afternoon in October. The trail was perfect. That's the only word for it. No roots crossing it, no rocks to trip over, no erosion despite the slope. The surface was packed earth, smooth as pavement but somehow still natural. On either side, the forest pressed in close, but no branches extended over the trail. It was like the trees were respecting some invisible boundary. I'd been walking for about 15 minutes when I noticed the silence. If you've spent any time in the wilderness, you know it's never truly quiet. There's always something: birds, insects, wind in the branches, the distant sound of water. But here, on this impossible trail, there was nothing. My footsteps didn't even echo right. They sounded muffled, absorbed by the air itself. I stopped to check my GPS again. According to the device, I'd traveled nearly 2 miles, which was impossible. I'm in good shape for a 53-year-old, but I'm not superhuman. At the pace I'd been walking, I should have covered maybe 3/4 of a mile at most. The GPS must be malfunctioning, I thought. But when I checked my watch, only 15 minutes had passed, just like I'd thought. The rational part of my brain, the part trained by 3 decades of wilderness experience, was screaming at me to turn back. This was wrong, all of it. Trails don't appear overnight. Distance doesn't distort. The forest doesn't go silent. But there was another part of me, maybe the part that had driven me to become a ranger in the first place, that needed to know where this trail led. I radioed Jennifer. "Dispatch, Sullivan checking in. Following the trail, everything's fine. Copy that, Dave. Your 30 minutes are almost up. How far have you gone?" I looked at my GPS again. It now said I'd traveled 3 miles. "About half a mile," I lied, not sure why. "All right. Next check-in at 14:45 hours. I continued down the trail, and that's when I saw the first hiker. He was about 50 yards ahead of me, walking in the same direction. This should have been reassuring. Another person, proof that this trail was just some oversight in our mapping. But something about the way he moved wasn't right. His gait was too smooth, too regular, like he was gliding rather than walking. And his clothes. As I got closer, I could see he was wearing hiking gear. But it was wrong. The style was from the 1970s. External frame pack, canvas pants, those old waffle stomper boots that no one had worn in decades. But the clothes looked new, pristine, like they'd just come off the rack at some vintage store. "Hey there," I called out, using my friendly ranger voice. "Sir, can I talk to you for a moment?" He didn't respond, didn't even turn his head. Just kept walking at that same unnaturally smooth pace. I picked up my speed, closing the distance between us. When I was maybe 10 feet behind him, I could see more details. His hair was styled in that feathered way that was popular in the 70s. His pack had patches from various national parks, but the designs were all wrong. Older versions of logos that had been updated decades ago. "Sir, I need to speak with you," I said more firmly, reaching out to touch his shoulder. My hand went right through him. I'm not ashamed to admit I yelled. Jumped back, nearly fell on my ass. The hiker, or whatever it was, just kept walking, completely unaware of my existence. I stood there, heart pounding, watching this impossible person walk down this impossible trail, and I knew I should turn back. Every instinct, every bit of training, every ounce of common sense said to get the hell out of there. But I followed him instead. The trail began to change as we walked. Subtle at first, the trees seemed older, larger. Then, more obvious changes. The trail surface shifted from packed earth to gravel, then to what looked like old asphalt, cracked and broken but still recognizable. Signs appeared alongside the trail, wooden posts with carved directions, but the text was in a mix of English and something else, characters I didn't recognize. More hikers appeared, all moving in the same direction. all dressed in different eras of outdoor gear. I saw someone in what looked like 1950s climbing a tire. Another in gear from the 80s, all neon and Gore-Tex. A woman in a dress that belonged in the 1920s, completely inappropriate for hiking, but she moved along the trail as easily as the others. None of them could see me. I tried talking to them, shouting, even standing directly in their path. They walked through me like I was the ghost. My radio crackled. "Dave, you missed your check-in. Everything okay?" I looked at my watch. 3:15 p.m. I'd missed not one but 2 check-ins. But that was impossible. I'd only been walking for... I couldn't remember. Time had gotten fuzzy, indistinct. "Sorry, Jen. Got distracted by the trail. I'm heading back now." "Copy that. You sound weird. You okay?" "Yeah, just the altitude, maybe." "I'm fine." I turned around to head back and my blood went cold. The trail behind me was gone. Not overgrown or hidden. Gone. Where I'd just walked was nothing but dense forest. Trees so thick you couldn't squeeze between them. The only way was forward, following the parade of temporal hikers toward whatever destination this trail led to. I tried my GPS again. Error. No signal. My compass spun lazily, unable to find north. My phone, which should have had at least emergency satellite connection, showed no service. I was cut off, on a trail that shouldn't exist, following ghosts from different decades with no way back. The rational thing would have been to panic, but after 30 years as a ranger, panic wasn't in my vocabulary anymore. I did what I always did when lost hikers asked me what to do if they couldn't find the trail. I kept walking, staying calm, observing everything. The trail began to climb, switch backing up a slope that, according to my mental map of the area, should have been a sheer cliff face. The ghost hikers continued their steady pace, never tiring, never stopping. As we climbed, I noticed something else strange. The sun wasn't moving. It stayed locked in the same position, casting the same shadows, like time had stopped or we'd stepped outside of it. After what felt like hours but could have been minutes, the trail leveled out onto a plateau, and there, in the middle of absolutely nowhere, was a ranger station. Not a backcountry cabin or emergency shelter, a full ranger station, complete with parking lot, flagpole, and a sign that read, Yosemite National Park. Temporal Research Station Number 4. The ghost hikers walked past it without acknowledgement, continuing on the trail that led beyond the station. But I stopped, staring at this impossible building. It looked real, solid. The windows reflected the frozen sunlight. The American flag hung limp in the still air, and the door was open. Inside, I could see movement. Not the smooth, ethereal movement of the ghost hikers, but real human movement. Someone was in there. Someone who might have answers. I approached the station carefully, noting details. The architecture was wrong for any era I knew. Too modern to be historical, too outdated to be contemporary. It was like someone had tried to build a ranger station based on half-remembered descriptions from multiple time periods. As I reached the door, a voice called out from inside, a familiar voice. "Dave? Dave Sullivan? Jesus Christ, is that really you?" I knew that voice. It belonged to Mike Patterson, a ranger who'd disappeared on patrol in 1997. He'd been presumed dead after search teams found no trace of him. But here he was, 22 years later, looking exactly the same as the day he'd vanished. "Mike?" I said, my voice barely a whisper. "What the hell is this place?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Come on in, Dave. We've got a lot to talk about, and you're going to want to sit down for this." I entered the station and Mike closed the door behind me. Through the window, I could still see the ghost hikers passing by in their endless parade. "Welcome to Station 4, Mike said. The one that doesn't exist. The one that's on every trail that was never supposed to be. You found it the same way I did, didn't you? The trail that appeared overnight? I nodded, unable to form words. Yeah, they all find it eventually. Every ranger who's been here long enough, who knows the park well enough to notice when something's wrong. The trail calls to us. He walked to a filing cabinet and pulled out a folder, thick with papers. October 15th, 2019. We've been expecting you. Expecting me? Mike, what is this place? How are you still alive? It's been 22 years. Has it? He looked genuinely confused. Time doesn't work right here. I've been here maybe a month, maybe a century. It's hard to tell. The station exists outside normal time, connected to every timeline where Yosemite exists. Past, present, future, and all the possibilities in between. That's impossible. Is it? You walked here on a trail that didn't exist yesterday. You saw hikers from different decades. You traveled 3 miles in 15 minutes. What part of your experience today has been possible? He had a point. I sat down heavily in a chair that felt too solid, too real after everything I'd experienced. Why? Why does this place exist? Mike poured 2 cups of coffee from a pot that looked like it was from the 1960s but smelled freshly brewed. That's the million-dollar question. Best we can figure, the park itself created it. Yosemite has been here for millions of years, and millions of people have walked its trails, each one leaving a tiny impression on the landscape. All those footsteps, all those memories, all those moments, they build up. And sometimes, when conditions are just right, they manifest. The trail appears, connecting times and places that shouldn't connect. Oh yeah, there are others. Rangers from different eras who found the trail and ended up here. There's Tom from 1963, Sarah from 2008, a few others. They're out on patrol right now trying to map the temporal trails, figure out the pattern. And you can't leave? Mike's face darkened. We can leave the station, walk the trails, but we can't get back to our own times. Every trail leads somewhere different. 1920, 1987, 2045. Yeah, I've been to your future, Dave. But never back to 1997, never back to my wife and kids. The weight of what he was saying hit me. If I was trapped here, I'd never see my family again. My daughter was getting married next month. My grandson's first birthday was in December. There has to be a way out, I said. Maybe. We've been looking for 22 years, or a month, or a century. Mike Cisse stared out the window at the passing ghosts. The trail brought you here for a reason, Dave. It doesn't call to everyone. Only certain rangers, ones who understand the park on a deeper level, who feel its moods, its changes. That's insane. Sanity is relative here. You'll learn that soon enough. The inside of Station 4 defied logical explanation. From the outside, it looked like a standard ranger station, maybe 30 by 40 feet. But inside, corridors stretched in directions that shouldn't exist, leading to rooms that couldn't possibly fit within the building's footprint. Mike led me through a hallway lined with photographs, rangers from every era of the park's history, some in uniforms I recognized from historical displays, others in gear that looked impossibly advanced. The station adapts, Mike explained as we walked. It becomes what we need it to be. When Tom arrived from 63, it manifested a room full of the equipment he was familiar with. When Sarah showed up from 2008, it created a modern communications center. It's like the station is alive, responsive. We entered what Mike called the observatory, a circular room with windows that shouldn't exist. The station was single-story, but these windows looked down on Yosemite Valley from an impossible height. Through different panes, I could see the valley in different time periods. In one, I watched Native Americans crossing the meadows. In another, the construction of the Ahwahnee Hotel played out in fast forward. A third showed a Yosemite I didn't recognize, filled with structures that looked like they belonged in a science fiction movie. Future, Mike said, following my gaze. About 2087, we think. The park is different then: climate change, technological integration, some other factors we don't fully understand. How is any of this possible? Tom has a theory, a new voice said. I turned to see a woman in a 2008-era Ranger uniform entering the room. She looked to be in her 30s, with sun-weathered skin and eyes that had seen too much. Sarah Martinez, you must be the new arrival Mike radioed about. Dave Sullivan, I said, shaking her hand. It felt solid, real, warm, not like the ghost hikers on the trail. Tom thinks Yosemite sits on what he calls a temporal fault line, Sarah continued. Like a geological fault, but in time rather than rock. The millions of visitors, the ancient geology, the Native American spiritual significance, it all combines to make the boundaries between times thin here. Station 4 exists at the intersection of all possible timelines. And we're stuck here because we found it, Mike said simply. Once you know about Station 4, once you've walked the temporal trails, you can't unknow it. You become part of it. I thought about my family, about the life I'd left behind just hours ago. Or had it been hours? Time seemed meaningless here. There has to be a way back. Sarah and Mike exchanged glances. There might be, Sarah said carefully. But it's dangerous, and we're not sure it actually works. Before she could elaborate, an alarm sounded. Not a modern electronic alarm, but an old mechanical bell, the kind they'd used in fire towers in the early 1900s. Mike's expression turned serious. Temporal intrusion, he said, already moving. Someone's crossing over who shouldn't be. We rushed to what Mike called the monitoring room, a space filled with equipment from different eras. Vacuum tube computers sitting next to modern flat screens, telegraph keys beside satellite phones. Tom was already there, a grizzled ranger in a 1960s uniform, studying a map that seemed to show all the temporal trails at once, shifting and changing like a living thing. We've got a problem, Tom said without preamble. His accent was pure Boston, softened by decades in California. Someone's using the trails deliberately. This isn't random wandering. On one of the screens, I could see figures moving along a trail. Unlike the ghost hikers I'd encountered, these people were solid, real, and they were carrying equipment. Modern equipment that looked military or scientific. Who are they? I asked. We don't know, Mike said. But they've been appearing more frequently. They seem to know about the trails, about Station 4. They're looking for something. Sarah pulled up another screen, showing data I couldn't interpret. They're destabilizing the temporal boundaries. If they keep this up, the barriers between times could collapse entirely. What happens if that occurs? Tom laughed bitterly. Best case. Temporal paradoxes that unravel cause and effect in the park. Worst case? The collapse spreads beyond Yosemite, creating a temporal anomaly that could affect the entire planet. I stared at the screen, watching the figures move purposefully along the trail. They were heading toward Station 4. How long before they get here? Time doesn't work like that here, Mike said. They could arrive in 5 minutes, or 5 hours, or 5 years. Or they might never arrive at all if they take a wrong turn and end up in 1847. But even as he spoke, I could see the figures getting closer on the monitor. They moved with military precision, and I could now see they were wearing some kind of protective gear, hazmat suits modified with additional equipment I didn't recognize. "We need to stop them," I said. "With what?" Sarah asked. "We're park rangers, not soldiers, and even if we were, conventional weapons don't work properly here. The temporal field interferes with chemical reactions. Guns misfire, explosives don't explode, or worse, they go off at the wrong time." "Then we use the trails against them," I said, an idea forming. "If the trails respond to consciousness, to intent, maybe we can redirect them." Tom looked at me with new interest. "You're picking this up fast." "Most new arrivals take weeks to accept the reality of this place. I don't have weeks. My daughter's getting married. I need to get home." "About that way back," Sarah said. "There's a theory that if you can find the exact trail you came in on, at the exact same temporal phase, you might be able to return to your own time. But the trails are constantly shifting, and the phase has to be perfect. One ranger tried it in 2001. We found pieces of him scattered across 7 different decades." The alarm sounded again, louder this time. On the screen, the figures in hazmat suits had reached a junction in the trails. They consulted some kind of device, then took the path that led directly to Station 4. "They'll be here in minutes," Mike said. "Everyone gear up." "Gear up with what?" I asked. Tom smiled grimly and led us to another room I hadn't seen before, an armory of sorts, but filled with the strangest collection of equipment I'd ever seen. There were standard ranger tools from every era, but modified in ways that didn't make sense. A 1950s radio that sparked with electricity that bent light around it. A modern GPS unit that showed locations in time as well as space. A simple walking stick that seemed to phase in and out of existence. "The station provides," Tom said, handing me what looked like a standard ranger's flashlight from the 1970s. "But it never gives us weapons. Only tools. It's up to us to figure out how to use them." I clicked on the flashlight. Instead of a beam of light, it projected a field that made everything within it move in slow motion. A moth that had been flying through the beam suddenly crawled through the air like it was swimming through honey. "Temporal distortion field," Tom explained. "Useful for buying time, pun intended." Sarah grabbed what looked like a modern tablet, but the screen showed the same area from multiple time periods simultaneously. Mike took a rope that seemed to be made of light itself. We were armed with impossibilities, preparing to face an enemy we didn't understand, in a place that shouldn't exist. The front door of the station rattled. Someone was trying to get in. "They can't enter unless we let them," Mike said. "The station has rules. But if they know enough about this place, they might know how to bend those rules." Through the window, I could see them clearly now. 6 figures in modified hazmat suits, each carrying equipment that looked both scientific and militaristic. The leader, identifiable by different markings on their suit, approaches. The leader of the hazmat team approached the station's door and did something that made my blood run cold. They knocked. 3 times, deliberate and measured. It was such a mundane gesture in such an extraordinary situation that it felt more threatening than if they'd tried to break down the door. "Station 4 personnel," a voice said through an external speaker, muffled by the hazmat suit but clearly authoritative. "We know you're in there. We're with the Department of Temporal Affairs, United States Government, Timeline Prime. We need to talk." "Timeline Prime?" I whispered to Mike. "Our timeline," he explained. "The original one. 2019. Tom laughed bitterly. "There's no such thing as the Department of Temporal Affairs. Not in 1963 there wasn't." The voice continued, as if they could hear us. "But a lot has changed since you've been gone, Ranger Harrison." The government became aware of temporal anomalies in 2015. Yosemite was classified as a Class 5 temporal hazard zone in 2017. We've been monitoring Station 4 for 2 years. Sarah moved to a window, studying the team outside with her multi-temporal tablet. "Their equipment is real," she said quietly. "I can see their temporal signatures. They're all from 2019, but there's something else. They've been exposed to temporal energy before, multiple times." "Rangers," the voice continued. "I'm Colonel Marcus Webb, Commanding Officer of Temporal Response Unit 7. We're not here to harm you. We need your help. The temporal barriers are breaking down faster than our models predicted. If we don't act within the next—" There was a pause. "Presumably while he checked something, within the next subjective hour, the cascade failure will be irreversible." Mike looked at the rest of us. As the senior ranger present, the decision was his. After a long moment, he pressed the intercom button. "How do we know you're telling the truth?" "Because, Ranger Patterson, your wife Julia remarried in 2003. She had another child, a daughter named after you, Michelle. She's 16 now, and she wants to be a park ranger just like the father she never knew." Mike's face went pale. Sarah put a hand on his shoulder, steadying him. "That doesn't prove anything," Tom said, though his voice lacked conviction. "You could have researched that. Ranger Harrison, your grandson Thomas just graduated from MIT. He's working on theoretical physics, specifically temporal mechanics. He has your eyes and your stubbornness. Ranger Martinez, your brother finally got clean. He's been sober for 8 years and runs a recovery center in Fresno." Each piece of information hit like a physical blow. These weren't just facts that could be looked up. They were personal details, things that mattered. "What about me?" I asked, moving to the intercom. "I just got here. What can you tell me about David Sullivan?" There was a pause. "Ranger Sullivan, you're not supposed to be here, not yet. Our records show you disappearing on October 15th, 2021, 2 years from now." My mind reeled. "That's impossible. It's 2019. Time is more fluid than you realize, Ranger. The trail you found wasn't meant to appear for another 2 years. Something has accelerated the timeline. That's why we're here. The anomalies are increasing, happening out of sequence. If we don't stabilize the temporal matrix, past, present, and future will collapse into a single chaotic moment." I looked at the others. Sarah was checking her equipment, running calculations on her tablet. Tom was staring out the window, his hand on that strange walking stick. Mike stood frozen, still processing the information about his family. "We need to let them in," I said. "Dave, we don't know if we can trust them," Mike said. "No, but we know something's wrong." The trail appearing early, the increased intrusions, the destabilization Sarah mentioned. Maybe they have answers. After a long moment, Mike moved to the door. "Colonel Webb, we're going to open the door. Come in slowly. No sudden movements. This station has its own defenses, and we don't fully control them." He turned the handle, and the door swung open. Colonel Webb entered first, removing his helmet to reveal a weathered face with sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He was followed by his team, who kept their helmets on but lowered their weapons. "Thank you," Webb said. "I know this is a lot to process. Trust me, I've been dealing with temporal anomalies for 4 years, and I still get headaches trying to understand it all." "Start talking," Mike said. "What's really going on?" Webb pulled out a device that projected a holographic display in the air. Technology that definitely didn't exist in 2019, or at least not publicly. It showed Yosemite from above, but covered in a web of glowing lines. "These are the temporal trails," he said. We've been mapping them since we discovered their existence. At first, there were only a dozen or so, appearing rarely and briefly, but over the last year, they've been multiplying exponentially. The display zoomed in, showing Station 4 at the center of the web. This station is the nexus point. Every trail eventually leads here. We think it's because Station 4 exists in all timelines simultaneously. It's an anchor, keeping the various timelines from drifting too far apart. But something's wrong with the anchor, Sarah said, studying the display with her tablet. I can see it now. The station is shifting, losing cohesion. Webb nodded grimly. Exactly. We've traced the problem to its source. Someone, or something, is deliberately destabilizing the temporal matrix. They're using the trails to travel between timelines, stealing technology from the future, information from the past. Each incursion weakens the barriers a little more. Who? Tom asked. We don't know. They're careful, always staying just out of phase with our sensors. But we've seen the results of their work. Advanced technology appearing decades before it should be invented. Historical events changing in small but significant ways. People disappearing who shouldn't, appearing who should never have existed. He pulled up another display, showing a figure in a modified ranger uniform, but the face was obscured by temporal distortion. This is the only image we've managed to capture. They're using ranger credentials to access the trails, which suggests it's one of us, Mike finished. A ranger who found the trails and decided to exploit them. That's our theory. Someone who understands the park, the trails, the station. Someone who's been using their knowledge to reshape history for their own purposes. I thought about all the rangers who had disappeared over the years. Most were found, explained by accidents or wildlife encounters. But some were never found, never explained. How many had stumbled onto the trails? How many were out there lost in time, like Mike and the others? There's more, Webb continued. We've detected a massive temporal surge building. Our calculations suggest that within the next hour, subjective time, someone is going to attempt to fundamentally alter the timeline. If they succeed, everything changes. Not just the park, but history itself. How do we stop them? I asked. We need to stabilize the station first. It's the only fixed point in the temporal matrix. If we can lock it down, prevent any more unauthorized travel, we might be able to prevent the collapse. Sarah had been working on her tablet throughout the conversation. I might have something, she said. The station responds to Ranger authority, right? It recognizes us, provides what we need. What if we could use that? Pool our authority, all of us from different timelines, and command the station to seal itself. That might work, Tom said slowly, but it would mean no more travel. Everyone currently in the station would be stuck here permanently. I'm already stuck, Mike said, have been for 22 years. But Dave isn't, Sarah pointed out. He just arrived. If we seal the station now, he'll never get home. Everyone looked at me. My daughter's wedding, my grandson's birthday, my life in 2019, all of it hanging in the balance. If we don't do this, there might not be a home to get back to, I said, though the words felt like glass in my throat. Do it. Webb's team spread out, setting up equipment around the main room. The devices they pulled out looked impossibly advanced. Crystalline structures that hummed with energy, cables that seemed to be made of light, sensors that made the air shimmer around them. We're creating a temporal stabilization field, Webb explained. Combined with your Ranger authority over the station, it should be enough to lock down the nexus point. As they worked, I felt something change in the air. The temperature dropped, and that familiar silence from the trail descended on the station. Through the windows I could see the ghost hikers outside stopping their endless march, all turning to look at the station. "Something's coming," Tom said, gripping his walking stick. The lights in the station flickered. Not electric lights, but oil lamps, LEDs, and everything in between, all fluctuating in intensity. The photographs on the walls began to change, faces morphing, uniforms shifting between eras. "They're here," Webb said grimly. "Whoever's been destabilizing the timeline, they're making their move." A figure materialized in the center of the room. Not walked in, not appeared, materialized like they were stepping out of the air itself. They wore a ranger uniform, but it was wrong, composed of pieces from different eras. The hat was from the 1920s, the shirt from the 1970s, the pants modern, and the face was mine, but older, scarred, with eyes that held decades of experiences I hadn't lived. This other Dave Sullivan looked at me with a mixture of pity and contempt. "You always were too noble for your own good," he said. His voice my voice, but rougher, worn by years of speaking truths no one wanted to hear. Always choosing duty over opportunity. "You're me," I said, stating the obvious because my brain couldn't process anything else. "I'm what you become," he corrected. After 30 years of wandering the trails, seeing all of time laid out like a map, understanding that every tragedy could be prevented, every mistake corrected. I'm the you that decided to do something about it. "You're destroying the timeline," Webb said, his hand moving to his weapon. Other me laughed. "I'm improving it. Do you know how many people die in Yosemite over the decades? How many preventable accidents? How many species go extinct? How many moments of beauty are lost to time? I've been fixing things, saving lives, preserving what should be preserved." "You're playing God," Mike said. "No, I'm being a ranger. Protecting and preserving, just on a larger scale than you can imagine. Every change you make creates ripples," Sarah said, her tablet showing cascading probability failures. "You save one person, and their descendants change history. You preserve one species, and it affects the entire ecosystem. You're not fixing things, you're creating chaos." Other me waved dismissively. "Chaos is just a word for patterns we don't understand. I've seen the full pattern. I know how it all connects, and I know that in exactly—" He checked a device on his wrist. 3 minutes. "The barriers between all timelines will collapse, and I'll be able to reshape everything. Create a perfect timeline where no one gets lost in Yosemite, where the park remains pristine forever, where rangers like us are never forgotten or left behind." "That's not how it works," I said, understanding flooding through me. "The park isn't meant to be perfect. It's meant to be wild. People get lost because that's part of the wildness. Species evolve and go extinct because that's nature. You're not preserving Yosemite. You're trying to turn it into a museum, frozen and dead." Other me's expression hardened. "You'll understand when you've spent 30 years watching people die for no reason, when you've seen what I've seen." "No," I said firmly, "I won't become you. Because I'm making a different choice right now." I turned to the others. "Link up? All of us. Rangers from every era. Show the station who we are, what we stand for." Mike, Sarah, Tom, and I joined hands. After a moment, Webb and his team joined the circle. The moment our hands connected, I felt it. The combined authority of rangers across time, all united in a single purpose. The moment our circle completed, Station 4 responded. The walls began to glow with a soft, golden light that reminded me of sunrise over Half Dome. The constantly shifting photographs on the walls suddenly snapped into focus, showing every ranger who had ever served in Yosemite, from the military administrators of the 1890s to faces I didn't recognize, rangers who wouldn't be born for decades yet. Other me snarled and raised his hand, revealing a device that looked like a fusion of technologies from multiple eras: vacuum tubes connected to fiber optics, clockwork gears meshing with holographic projectors. "You don't understand what you're doing." I've seen every timeline, every possibility. In 90% of them, Yosemite burns to the ground by 2050. In half, humanity doesn't survive the century. I'm trying to save everything. "By destroying the natural order," Tom said, his 1960s sensibilities offended by the very concept. "Son, I've been around long enough to know that when you try to control nature completely, you don't preserve it, you kill it." The device in Other Me's hand began to pulse with unstable energy. The air around him rippled like heat mirages, but these distortions showed glimpses of other timelines. Yosemite covered in ice. Yosemite as a desert. Yosemite with cities where the valley should be. 3 minutes, Colonel Webb said urgently, checking his equipment. "The temporal surge is building. If he activates that device when the barriers are weakest, the station won't let him," Sarah interrupted, her eyes bright with understanding. "Look at the walls." Really look. I saw what she meant. The photographs weren't just showing rangers, they were showing their choices. Every moment when a ranger had to decide between safety and duty, between the easy path and the right one. And in every image, across every era, the choice was the same. We protected the park not from change, but for change. We preserved not a static moment, but a living, evolving wilderness. Other Me must have seen it too, because his expression shifted from anger to something like grief. "You don't know what it's like," he said, his voice breaking. 30 years of walking the trails. I've seen children who die on family camping trips. I've watched species go extinct. I've stood by while forest fires consume 1,000-year-old trees. I could prevent all of it. "But should you?" I asked, stepping forward, but not breaking the circle. "Those children, their deaths are tragedies, yes. But how many people learn to respect the wilderness because of those tragedies? Those extinct species, they made room for new ones to evolve. Those fires, they cleared the way for new growth. You're not seeing the whole pattern, just the parts that hurt." "Easy for you to say," he spat. "You haven't lived it yet. You haven't had to carry those memories, those possibilities." "No," I admitted. "But I'm carrying something else. The knowledge that even if I seal this station, even if I never see my family again, I'm making the right choice. Because that's what we do. We don't reshape nature to our will. We protect it, even from ourselves." The device in Other Me's hand began to crack, temporal energy leaking out in visible streams. The ghost hikers outside pressed against the windows, their faces urgent, trying to communicate something. Webb's equipment started screaming alarms. "The surge is happening now! Everyone hold on." Reality exploded. For a moment, or an eternity, I existed in every timeline simultaneously. I was a child visiting Yosemite for the first time. I was an old man dying peacefully while looking at El Capitan. I was a ranger in 1920, chasing poachers through the backcountry. I was a ranger in 2150, managing tourists from other planets. I was every version of myself that could ever exist, all at once. And in that infinite moment, I understood what Other Me had missed. The trails weren't just paths between times. They were Yosemite's memory, its way of experiencing its own existence across all of time simultaneously. Station 4 wasn't a nexus or an anchor. It was the park's consciousness, manifested in a form humans could partially comprehend. The park had been watching, waiting, letting rangers find the trails when it needed them to understand something. And what it needed us to understand now was simple. We were never meant to control time. We were meant to witness it. Let go, I told other me. Let go of the control. Let go of the burden. You've been trying to carry the weight of all possible futures. But that's not our job. Our job is just to be present, to serve our time, and trust those who come after. The device in his hand shattered completely, and temporal energy washed over us like a tide. But instead of destroying us, it passed through us, using our circle as a conduit. The station channeled it, stabilized it, and sent it flowing back into the trails where it belonged. Other me fell to his knees, aging rapidly. Not growing older, but becoming his true age, the accumulated years of his temporal wandering catching up all at once. His hair went white, his face creased with lines, his hands became gnarled with age. But his eyes looked peaceful for the first time. I remember now, he whispered. I remember why I became a ranger. Not to control, to serve, to protect, to witness. He looked up at me, at his younger self. Don't become me. When you find the trails again, and you will, remember this moment. Remember that the greatest power is knowing when not to use it. He faded like morning mist, not dying but dissipating back into the temporal streams from which he'd emerged. The ghost hikers outside began walking again. Their eternal journey resumed. The station's golden glow dimmed to normal light. It's done, Webb said, checking his readings. The temporal matrix is stabilizing. The trails they're still there, but they're dormant, sleeping. For how long? Mike asked. Until the park needs them again, Sarah said, understanding dawning in her voice. That's how it works, isn't it? The trails appear when Yosemite needs someone to understand something, to make a choice that affects its future. We were all chosen not because we were special, but because we were here when we were needed. Tom laughed, the sound both bitter and relieved. So we're what? Antibodies? The park's immune system against temporal threats? Something like that, Webb agreed. He looked at his team. We should go. Our presence here is already an anomaly. The less we disturb things, the better. What about us? Mike asked. Are we still trapped here? Webb consulted his equipment. The station is sealed, but not permanently. It's more like dormant. You can leave, return to your own times. The trails will take you home. But once you leave, you can never come back. The knowledge of this place will fade, become like a half-remembered dream. You'll remember being lost, being found, but not the details. Except for Dave, Sarah said, looking at me with sympathy. You're the anomaly. You weren't supposed to find the trails for another 2 years. If you leave now, you'll remember everything. The knowledge will be a burden. I thought about my daughter's wedding, my grandson, my life waiting for me in 2019. Then I looked at Mike, who hadn't seen his family in 22 years. At Tom, who'd been gone since 1963. At Sarah, who'd missed 8 years of her life. You all go first, I said. Make sure you get home safe. I'll figure out my situation after. Mike gripped my shoulder. Dave, you don't have to— Yeah, I do. Someone needs to make sure everyone gets back safely. Someone needs to close up the station properly. That's what we do, right? We're the ones who stay behind to make sure everyone else gets out safe. One by one, they left. Tom first, walking into a trail that shimmered with the light of 1963. He turned back once, tipped his hat, and was gone. Sarah next, her tablet still in hand, documenting everything until the last moment before she stepped into 2008. Webb and his team filed out, their equipment vanishing with them as if it had never existed. Mike was last. Dave, Go see your family, Mike. Your daughter, who was named after you. She needs to know her father was a hero, even if she can't know the whole truth. He hugged me, a breach of professional protocol that felt completely right, and walked into his trail back to 1997. But just before he disappeared, he called back, "The station will show you the way." It always does. And then I was alone in Station 4. The building immediately began to change, shrinking, becoming more real and less infinite. The impossible corridors collapsed back into normal space. The observatory's windows became ordinary windows showing only the present moment. The station was returning to what it appeared to be, just an abandoned ranger station in the backcountry. I walked to the door, planning my long hike back to civilization, preparing the story I'd tell about getting lost, about losing time. But when I opened the door, I wasn't looking at the plateau where the station sat. I was looking at my own ranger station, the real one, in the Yosemite Valley. The familiar parking lot, my truck sitting exactly where I'd left it. The American flag flying in the afternoon breeze, and walking toward me, looking annoyed, was Jennifer Martinez from Dispatch. "Dave, where the hell have you been? You missed 4 check-ins. We were about to send search and rescue after you." I looked at my watch. 4:47 p.m. October 15th, 2019. According to the time, I'd been gone exactly 2 hours. I got turned around," I said, the lie coming easily. "GPS malfunction. Ended up bushwhacking in circles for a while." She studied me suspiciously. "You look like you've aged 10 years in 2 hours." "It was a tough hike," I said weakly. She shook her head. "Get inside and write up your report. And, next time, maintain radio contact." As she walked away, I turned back to look at where Station 4 should have been. There was nothing there but the usual backcountry view. Mountains and forests and the eternal presence of Yosemite. But for just a moment, in the corner of my eye, I saw them. Mike, Tom, Sarah, and the other me who'd chosen differently. They were standing at the edge of the temporal trail, watching. Mike gave me a thumbs up. Tom tipped his hat, Sarah waved. And other me nodded just once in understanding and approval. Then they were gone. And I was just Ranger David Sullivan, standing in a perfectly normal parking lot, on a perfectly normal October day, with a perfectly normal life to return to. Except I knew the truth. The trails were still out there, dormant but not gone. Station 4 existed in the spaces between moments, waiting for the next time it would be needed. And somewhere, in all the possible timelines, Rangers were doing what we'd always done, protecting and serving, witnessing and preserving, choosing the hard right over the easy wrong. I went inside and wrote my report. It was brief, factual, and contained not a word of truth. Investigated reported bear activity near Glen Aulin. No significant findings. GPS malfunction resulted in temporary disorientation. Situation resolved. No further action required. Jennifer filed it without comment. Why wouldn't she? It was just another routine report from another routine day. That night, I went home to my family. I hugged my daughter extra long, played with my grandson until he fell asleep, told my wife I loved her about 6 more times than usual. They noticed something was different but didn't press. Rangers sometimes had tough days. It was part of the job. 2 weeks later, my daughter got married. I walked her down the aisle in Yosemite Valley with El Capitan as a witness. During the ceremony, I could have sworn I saw a familiar trail forming in the trees behind the altar, and figures watching from times that hadn't happened yet. But when I blinked, there was just the normal forest. Beautiful and wild and exactly as it should be. I'm still a ranger. I still patrol the same areas, still help lost tourists, still file routine reports. But sometimes, especially on quiet October afternoons, I find myself in that grove of lodgepole pines where it all started. The trail has never reappeared. The forest floor remains undisturbed, but I know it's there, just out of phase with our reality, waiting. And I know that someday, maybe in 2021, if the original timeline holds, I'll find it again. Or another ranger will, and the cycle will continue. Because that's what Yosemite teaches you after 30 years, or 300, or 3,000. Time isn't a line or a circle. It's a trail that exists whether you can see it or not, leading through wilderness that's always changing and always the same. And we're all just wanderers on that trail, doing our best to preserve something bigger than ourselves, something that exists in all times at once. The trail that wasn't on any map is still there. It will always be there. And when Yosemite needs someone to walk it again, it will appear. Until then, we watch. We wait. We protect and serve, and we remember, even when we're supposed to forget, that some paths lead not through space but through time. And the most important journey is often the one that brings you right back where you started. Changed, wiser, and carrying secrets that can never be shared but can never truly be forgotten. If you ever find yourself in Yosemite, and you see a trail that wasn't there yesterday, a path that seems too perfect, too inviting, remember this story. Remember that some invitations, once accepted, change you forever. Remember that time is stranger than we think, and the wilderness holds mysteries that go deeper than any canyon. And if you choose to walk that trail anyway, know that you're not alone. Somewhere, in some time, rangers are watching. We're always watching. That's our job. That's our choice. That's what 30 years in Yosemite really teaches you. Not that nature has laws, but that nature is the law, and we're all subject to its jurisdiction, whether we exist in 1963, 2019, or a tomorrow that hasn't been decided yet. The trail is waiting. It will always be waiting, and so are we.